Ladies and gentlemen, RosterWatch Nation, welcome back to the epic RosterWatch Podcast, brought to you by RosterWatch.com. My name is Alex Dunlap, and joining me today, a great friend of the podcast, a great friend of the radio show, a great friend of mine, in the fantasy world and IRL. His name is Scott Barrett. You can find him on Twitter at scottbarrettdfb. He works at fantasypoints.com, which is our great friend and a colleague over at SiriusXM Fantasy Sports Radio, John Hansen's site. It's got people who've been on the podcast over there, from Graham Barfield to John Proctor to you name it, man. It's a great hive they got over there, and Scott has some great work, including his My Guys column this week that you can find over there at Fantasy Points, as well as insight from guys like Adam Kaplan, Greg Cosell, et cetera, et cetera. So find it all at Fantasy Points. You can find Scott on Twitter at scottbarrettdfb. Scott, what the hell's going on, brother?
Hey, thanks for having me on.
No, man, it's great to have you on. So let's talk about your My Guys column right off. I know you can't give away the goods. You can't. Nobody's going to buy no one's going to buy the cow if they can get the milk for free. But let's just give them a little taste of some milk. Let's give them a little. And this is one that I really wanted to talk to you about, because a lot of your guys are my guys. One of your guys, who's certainly not one of my guys, who seems like he's like one of your most guys would you have the most conviction on, is Jacoby Myers from NC State. What is it that you love so much this year coming into the season about Jacoby Myers? Because in these drafts, Nelson Agholor is a guy that I've looked to draft in the 13th and 14th round, thinking that, man, this could be a team's number one outside weapon, and nobody wants him. It seems like you've sort of identified some value there in the Patriots passing game as well, but you're going in a different direction with Jacoby Myers.
Yeah, so I like Nelson Agholor too. He made all that money, so there's a chance I'm wrong on Myers and it's Nelson Agholor who's the guy. That's fine. They're both basically free. So in a lot of FFPC, Football Guys Players Championship main event leagues, I'll draft both just in case I'm wrong. But no, Jacoby Myers is one of my highest owned wide receivers. Like I said, he's been free, but I expect that to change. Last week or last night, he led all Patriots wide receivers and snaps with the first string offense. He played on 15 of 17, and he looked awesome. He's been one of Cam Newton's favorite targets. He was targeted 4 times through 2 games on 15 total throws. Nelson Agholor, I don't think he has a single target. I think maybe only one other target for a non-Jacoby Myers wide receiver. He went off last night, 3 catches, 3 targets, 56 yards and a score. And I just believe in his talent. I've believed in his talent for a long time. One of my PFF buddies was at New England Patriots camp his rookie season, and he was like, this guy is way better than N'Keal Harry, and it isn't even close. I think he's awesome. And so just digging into Myers, you look at his numbers from last year, he's an obvious touchdown regression candidate, whatever. He averaged 7.3 targets, 65.6 yards per game from week 7 on, whatever. Digging deeper into the advanced stats, wow. So he was deemed open on 86% of his targets, according to PFF Charters. That ranks second best of 77 qualifying wide receivers. He finished the season 12th in yards per route run. That's one of the best stats around. 25th in PFF grade. And here's a crazy stat. From week 7 on, he ranked second in yardage share. It was Devontae Adams, Jacoby Myers, A.J. Brown, Allen Robinson. That's a great list to be on, let alone number 2. So what happened? That didn't really translate into fantasy points. Why? Because if you look at who Cam Newton was last year, he was literally Tim Tebow. Like, you take Tim Tebow's career per start stats, and it was the same player except slightly worse all around. So, the passing game was dead. It was a high volume, a lot of runs, not a lot of passes. So low pass volume, very low efficiency. So ideally you get a Mac Jones in there. And 38.9% yardage share. And that changes dramatically and really translates into fantasy points. We know that the slot wide receiver in a Bill Belichick offense has been money for fantasy. Of course, the Tom Brady effect, Wes Welker's no slouch, Julian Edelman's no slouch, but from 2007 to 2019, the starting slot wide receiver ranked 10th, 1st, 21st, 2nd, 8th, 15th, 14th, 7th, 17th, 26th, 12th and 9th in fantasy points per game. Those are some crazy numbers. And so that's what I'm chasing there with Jacoby Myers, as I think the likely starting slot wide receiver in New England's offense.
No, that's good. That's all good. I mean, as you would expect from Scott, that's good shit. I mean, he backs up his points. My only concern is this one. I'm not sure how long it is till we see Mac Jones. You're saying that you don't think that the Cam Newton stuff. I mean, you're just as happy with Mac Jones and they're throwing to Jacoby Myers. I mean, I would personally think that that's an upgrade. But some of that analysis was sort of based around Cam. And then my other question is, what about when Jonnu and Hunter Henry both get in there? Are they going to move? Because they're going to probably run some two tight end sets. Do you worry at all about his ability to move outside? Do you think that they'll play him outside at all?
No. So I am banking on Mac Jones being an inevitability starting at some point in the season and everyone getting a major upgrade. I think that's important. I think that's going to happen. Hunter Henry, I think he's dust. Like, I'm sorry. I loved him.
Okay.
I loved Hunter Henry. I think he's just cooked at this point following multiple, pretty bad knee injuries. And so you get Mac Jones in there. James White, I'm boosting him by let's say 3.2 fantasy points per game. I think that's massive. Damian Harris, no more goal line vultures from the quarterback. I think that's massive. That's like 3 to 4 fantasy points per game. And then the receivers, I think that's huge. I like Jonnu Smith. I really do. But Jacoby Myers, I mean, he's free and I see face melting upside. So those are the players I gravitate towards. And that's why he's one of my highest owned wide receivers. ADP, wide receiver 65. I'll bet you $100 he beats that.
Oh yeah, I would never bet you $100 on that. He's certainly going to be certainly going to be a good value, and you make a compelling case as I would expect from you, Scott. All right, what about? I mean, you mentioned Damian Harris a little bit there. I want to talk to you about some running backs, but as long as we're talking about the Patriots, are you in on Damian Harris? I mean, it feels like with all this Ramondre Stevenson garbage that we're getting in the preseason, that's might be driving down. At least in our cheat sheet simulations, it feels like we're getting Damian Harris at value a little more often than usual. Are you in on Damian Harris? Do you buy the talent? And then do you like him more than guys like, say, at this point? I mean, I'm to the point wherever I think I like Damian Harris more than Myles Gaskin based on what we've seen with the usage out of these Miami running backs. Do you have any thoughts on him?
Yeah, so I did a big preseason week 1 review article for the site where I basically just, Gaskin has plummeted down my rankings. He was a guy I really liked. I thought he was going to get a similar role to the one he had last year, which would have been hyper valuable for fantasy. And then what I said for the Patriots backfield was I see this backfield looking a lot like it did in 2016, where Damien Harris is LeGarrette Blount getting 73% of the team's carries. And then James White is going to be James White of 2016. There's no Rex Burkhead. He averages 8 fantasy points per game more when Rex Burkhead's inactive. But I'm kind of walking that back. We saw 4 catches, 4 targets from Sony Michel last night. Maybe he's going to be in that Rex Burkhead role. New England beat writers have been hyping that up all offseason, and I was hesitant to believe it. But, man, he saw that role, and he looked good in that role. Harris, he's really just a best ball pick for me. I think he's a solid one. I think he's a good one. But he's not a player I'll draft in typical start-sit leagues because I always go start-sit. Start-sit leagues. I always go RB to start, and then I sort of neglect that dead zone range where everyone else is taking flyers on guys. It's the low upside and low hit rate from that range, and I just question his upside. I mean, what is he? He's a committee back. He's going to be heavily game script dependent. He needs positive game script. He needs Cam Newton not to vulture his touchdowns. So not really a player I love in traditional leagues, but a great best ball pick.
Yeah, so you don't take dead zone guys. Stop me when we get to a dead zone guy that you might pull the trigger on, that you might go against your own rules to draft. DeAndre Swift is falling into this. Are we called the dead zone 3 through 7?
I mean, I arbitrarily defined it as my tier 4 running backs and beyond.
Okay.
Where really it ends for me
at Chris Carson.
No, at the end of round 2, like Clyde Edwards-Helaire, and that's why I'm going RB in like 99% of my leagues.
So J.K. Dobbins and Montgomery and these guys just aren't in consideration. Like DeAndre.
I mean,
Swift
they're in consideration. Like both are very close to that tier, but I do have them the next tier down. Where J.K. Dobbins, like he's like a poor man's Nick Chubb, and I don't like Nick Chubb, so that's not a compliment.
Yeah, that's funny.
So last year I said, #vault me, J.K. Dobbins will lead all running backs in yards per carry. That made me look smart, but like that's a nothing call. It's just, I think he's going to be hyper efficient because he's a great fit for this offense. Konami code quarterbacks help ground game efficiency for the running backs. The question is volume. Like, if Gus Edwards is taking, 40% of the team's running back carries, and then Lamar Jackson's vulturing an additional 33% of the rushing touchdowns, and Konami code quarterbacks don't target running backs, it's like, where's his upside? Like, are we really banking on, 100 rushing yards on 12 carries consistently? Like, so I don't know about that. David Montgomery is a tricky guy where if he is who he was after the Tariq Cohen injury, he's one of the best picks you can make. If it's a committee with, Cohen when he's healthy, stealing all the passing down work, or perhaps Damien Williams and something akin to that role, that's, not at all attractive. And he's like fairly priced, I guess. But I just don't like those lower tier running backs. I want bell cow running backs who play all 3 downs or heavily involved in both the running and passing game, have that massive league winning upside. So that's, again, I'm RB to start in like 99% of my leagues. It's just optimal. And all the numbers I have back that up.
Yeah. Just one other question about these sort of dead zone guys. Are you warming up to Daryl Henderson? Are you cooling off on him? How is your mentality on Daryl Henderson sort of evolved through this preseason?
Yeah, I'm definitely warming up to him. He initially really scared me just because 2 of my biggest misses last year, Ronald Jones in round 9, I thought that was an awesome pick, even though he didn't have bell cow upside. I just thought, this Tampa Bay offense is going to smash, and he's so cheap. And then Clyde Edwards-Helaire as in the Brian Westbrook role, I'm like, oh my God, yes. And then, Leonard Fournette, Le'Veon Bell get cut. So I've been kind of waiting to see what might happen. But yeah, I mean, it's just like he could be a bell cow. And then even if he's not, even if he's just the RB1 in this offense, which should be a freaking awesome offense, there's a lot of value there. I'm still not really drafting him, but definitely warming up to him.
I have Clyde Edwards-Helaire in sort of his own tier that is between the Ecklers and the Najee Harrises and the, Antonio Gibsons and stuff like that, and the Chris Carsons, the David Montgomerys, et cetera. You were big on Clyde last year. Are you diving back in the pool this year at a much cheaper price?
Yeah, I think so. A lot of the criticisms people raise, I think, are valid. Like, hey, maybe he's just not as good as we wanted him to be. Hey, maybe there's just not that much upside for a running back in this offense because, Patrick Mahomes doesn't need to target running backs as often as Donovan McNabb did because he's the best quarterback in football. And then Tyreek Hill's going to vulture some rushing touchdown and like, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. That's fine. You can you could price all that in, and he still feels like a value to me. I still really like his upside. I still really like his odds of finishing as a low-end RB1. So, yeah, he's definitely someone I've come back around on and have been drafting.
Whenever you start these drafts, you like to get 2 running backs at first. To me, after what do you think? What do you think about Aaron Jones? It feels like people are starting to kind of come around on him. I've never been a guy that's drafted Aaron Jones super early. I've always been a little bit worried about his touch share and just always been various issues with Aaron Jones. This year, I'm finding it harder and harder to pick holes in his fantasy in his fantasy profile. I mean, to me, he feels like he's RB6. Do you have thoughts on Aaron Jones this year? Are you typically high on him, and sort of where do you have him? Do you have him going in the first round? Because it feels like I'm a little bit high on him based on the simulations. We can usually get him at pick 9, pick 10, something like that. It feels like terrific value to me.
Yeah, so I wrote like 10,000 plus words for my bell cow report, where I just went in deep on all of the top 25 drafted running backs, and then the dead zone RBs I do kind of like. And I was shocked. Like I for whatever reason, I was saving the Aaron Jones blurb for last, I guess because of the Aaron Rodgers situation. And surprisingly, it was the most difficult write-up for me. Like, I didn't expect that at all, but it ended up being the most difficult, where it's like, what do we make of A.J. Dillon? I can't get that one game out of my head where Jones was fully healthy and it was a blowout, but Dillon saw like 20-plus carries, twice as much as Jones. And even if you adjust for the blowout, you just look at the first half, Dillon massively out-carried him. Jamal Williams is gone. If you give away all of Jamal Williams' targets to Aaron Jones and like 50% of the carries, it's still not a massive bump for Jones. But what happened was Jamal Williams played on a lot of empty snaps. So if you look at it by snaps, like it is a big boost to Jones. Like he just played a bunch of snaps and just didn't do anything there, I guess because of pass blocking or what have you. Mm-hmm. But anyway, so in my guys, like I am dangerously high on Joe Mixon and Antonio Gibson, and that's been the case for months now. And so I have a lot of subscribers who are like, hey, what do I do if I'm at the whatever? Do I just take your guys, or should I just defer to ADP and take an Eckler or Jones who I have below them? Uh-huh. I said what I'm doing. You could do whatever you want, but what I'm doing is, if I'm forced into that, I'll take Saquon if he's there, but if he's not, I'm not afraid to go, Gibson, then Mixon, and have it as my round 1, round 2 running backs, where for the subscribers, it's like, well, that feels really gross. Like I'm giving up so much value. But I think by the end of the preseason, a lot of people are going to be there. I think Gibson's going to climb into round 1. And so that, people are like, yeah, damn, I wish I did that.
And are you buying into this? I mean, you and I have been talking about Antonio Gibson since his Senior Bowl. But so clearly, I mean, I'm big on Antonio Gibson this year as well. But I mean, did you see the quote? Did you see the quote from Scott? Or no, who was it from? It was a quote from the backup court. What's his name? Kyle Allen. The quote from Kyle Allen about saying that Scott Turner wanted to make him just like Christian McCaffrey and utilize him in the same way, something along those lines. I saw that and I was like, Jesus, this is big time. But is it coach speak? What do you think? I mean, it can't be bad to hear that kind of thing, right?
Yeah, well, first of all, I own Antonio Gibson in a ton of my dynasty leagues at a price of free because you put me on him well before the combine. So right. Big shout out and thank you for that. Yeah, so that was interesting, the Christian McCaffrey comparison. But guess what? We got the Christian McCaffrey comparison from both Ron Rivera and Scott Turner last year when they drafted him. And that was always the plan with Antonio Gibson. The plan was, so Scott Turner said in early November, physically he can do everything. Antonio's our guy. We're going to continue to give him the ball. I believe in him. We don't want to get him to the point where he's overwhelmed. So his role is going to continue to grow throughout the year. I maintain that if Gibson stayed healthy, he would be drafted at like 105, 106, what happened was he got hurt, but we saw his role continue to grow, just as Scott Turner described, where in week 12, he saw season highs in snap share, carries, targets, fantasy points, 20 carries, 7 targets, 36.6 fantasy points. What happened the next week? He got hurt. And then he spent the remainder of the season either inactive or listed on the questionable on the injury report. You take that injury away, he's continuing to see 20 carries and 7 targets, things of that nature. on that. Like, there is no way he's not a top 6 pick. But because that injury came in, people missed that. They wanted him in that McCaffrey role, and they were prepared to continue to where it would have been like a David Johnson rookie season, which is what I said in the preseason as well. And I think we're looking at like a David Johnson sophomore season with Antonio Gibson this year.
All right, so let's just say I would guess, Scott, that what you really like in these home leagues is to be able to get a top 5, probably a top 5 pick if you're not going to pick at the turn and go maybe do a little bit of what people consider reaching for the Mixon-Gibson duo. It would seem to me like maybe you'd want to get like a Derrick Henry or a Kamara or something like that, and then maybe wait until the 2.06 and probably hope that a Mixon would fall. It feels like Mixon would fall. Maybe Gibson would fall, right? If you get off to a start like that, you get your 2 running backs. Let's just put yourself in the is that the best start for you? Is that the kind of start that you like the most? Like one of the highest of the high end running backs, along with one of your 2 guys that you're super high on, Mixon or Gibson. Is that the kind of start that you like best?
Yeah, I just drafted an FFPC league, and I didn't draft McCaffrey, so that means I'm not going to win. Like I just think McCaffrey is like the all-time
Damian Tomlinson,
literally, where he like breaks snake drafts. He should do an auction draft. You should do a 3rd round revert because it's so unfair. 2 years ago, I finished 15th in the Football Guys Players Championship, so I won like a couple $1,000. First place was like $500,000, but I had the best non-McCaffrey team. I just didn't have a top 2 pick, so it wasn't possible. But yeah, so I drafted a team last week. I had Dalvin from 102, and I had Joe Mixon 211. That's ideal. In NFL.com leagues, Mixon and Gibson are both going in round 3. So if you can get like McCaffrey, Gibson, Mixon would be like the most perfect start of all time.
The holy trinity of starts. Well, you're not going to get that very often. But let's just say you start out. Let's say you start out. You get a Dalvin, a McCaffrey, one of these high end dudes. I don't know how you stack up Derrick Henry and Kamara and Zeke or stuff. But let's say you get one of those guys, and then you come back around on the turn. You get an Antonio Gibson, or you come back around in the kind of the middle to late part of the second. You get an Antonio Gibson or a Joe Mixon. Now you're going to be pivoting to wide receiver, right? I would guess, unless Travis Kelce or somebody, or I mean, what if Waller fell? Would you be interested in him there?
Yeah, I would.
Okay, even in these non-FFPC, even in non-tight end premium.
I gave you my tight end preference before the show, so like because he's there and he's a value, although he's climbing, I typically would rather have him, but at value. But yeah, I mean, Waller's no slouch. He's definitely in the conversation. Like him a lot.
Okay. And I forgot who Scott's tight end preference was, but you can definitely go find it in his My Guys column over there at Fantasy Points. Whenever you get to there, is there a wide receiver that would be just like you say, holy shit, this is perfect. I can't believe so-and-so fell to me here with my first wide receiver pick here in the 3rd.
No, but in the 5th, it's Adam Thielen. I have no idea why he's going in round 5 of FFPC leagues, but he's going super late this year. That makes no sense to me. For that round 3 range,
like a McLaurin, a CeeDee Lamb, a Keenan Allen.
I love Terry McLaurin. He ranked 8th in fantasy points per game prior to an ankle injury. He played with 2 high ankle sprains at the tail end of the season. That's crazy. Like no one does that. But anyway, so before the first of the 2 high ankle sprains, one on each leg, he had he ranked 8th in fantasy points per game with like the worst quarterback core. And we've seen Ryan Fitzpatrick uplift his wide receiver 1 time and time again. So definitely like Terry McLaurin. Yeah.
All right, but you didn't go into much detail about Thielen. What is it about Thielen? You think he's just going way too late? I mean, do you like him? Do you like Adam? Would you prefer Adam Thielen over guys like, I mean, Chris Godwin and stuff?
I would.
Okay. What is it? I mean, is it just? Can you talk about Thielen?
Yeah. So his ADP is wide receiver 21, and it's just like really as simple as this. Over the past 4 seasons, Thielen has finished 11th, 7th. He got hurt, and then 11th in fantasy points per game. And so the year he got hurt, 2019, he was averaging 17.3 fantasy points per 4 quarters. That would have ranked 7th best, but he had a hamstring injury, so he missed a bunch of time. He was a decoy, only played on 7 snaps in one game, whatever. So 11th, 7th, and 11th in fantasy points per game. That's just like a massive floor. Really good odds of beating that wide receiver 21 ADP. Yeah, Justin Jefferson's a god for sure, but he's also now going to be drawing elite CB1s in shadow coverage, giving Thielen the more advantageous matchup. Kyle Rudolph's not there. Thielen's Kirk Cousins guy in the red zone. It's just stupid ADP.
If you had final question for you, Scott, and again, you can find him on Twitter at scottbarrettdfb. You can find his content over at fantasypoints.com. Please, if you're not following Scott, you certainly should be. Not only is he a great friend, but he's a great resource and a great source of fantasy football intelligence for you. That's very, very, very active on social media. That is at scottbarrettdfb. All right, Scott, final question. You need an upside quarterback for the 2021 season. You don't necessarily need this person to be your quarterback to start right off, but it's a late round guy. Is it Jalen Hurts or is it Trey Lance?
Oh, yeah. So those have both been my guy quarterbacks for many months now. But no, it's Hurts. If I have to pick, it's definitely Hurts who, has the advantage in terms of starting week 1. But yeah, I one of my all-time best calls was Lamar Jackson 2 years ago, where I put down MVP bets on him. Only player I bet the entire offseason, bet it in multiple months. I said he was the best value in drafts at any position, highest owned player, and he smashed. I'm seeing the exact same things I saw with Lamar Jackson that I'm seeing with Jalen Hurts. One of the most productive running quarterbacks in college football history. Last season, he averaged 24.8 fantasy points per 4 quarters, 11.3 rushing, or 25.9 fantasy points per game in games started and finished. That would have ranked 8th best all time, or it would have ranked best all time, depending on which of those two stats I just referenced. So he doesn't just have high-end QB1 upside. He has overall QB1, historically great levels of upside. And then you just factor in, the upgrades to the receiving core. Last year, everyone was hurt. They weren't good, and everyone was hurt. Now you have a healthy Dallas Goedert, a healthy Zach Ertz, Devonta Smith, who won the Heisman last year, Quez Watkins coming into his own, Jalen Reagor in the slot. And man, it's just everything's pointing to this guy being an immense value and one of the best picks you can make in drafts.